So Zen, tell me how did you get involved in DRR a long time ago?
That was many moon years ago or many moons ago. That's very, I think it started in the late 70s and yeah, and went on. It's like when you live in a country like the Philippines, where everything is there, human sourced disasters and natural disasters, you can't get away from it. And so initially as an activist, uh, I'll just say we fought against Marcos, right? And so we confronted the issues of poverty, marginalization, vulnerabilities, all these things. And then disasters or hazards occur.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that the poor populations are affected. So in that sense, you psychologically are getting involved in how to help those people. And then sometime in 19 early or mid 80s, I was invited to be part of the Citizens Disaster Response Center. And the orientation really suits me because disaster is looked at as a question of vulnerability, not a question of hazard. And so the very progressive approach in dealing with disaster appealed to me, and so I agreed. I started as project officer looking at the projects of the regional centers. At the time, CDRC has like several regional centers when we call and CDRC is at the national center, and it has five. No, at that time it was not yet that well developed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I joined and we started to organize the Citizens Disaster Response Network, in which we said that disaster work is not just about an agency, it's a movement.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning a movement of people dealing with disasters. And the concept of less vulnerable people and the vulnerable people, they should be working together to address. One is the vulnerable or the poor people, they have a stake, okay? And the least vulnerable people, they in a sense they're still vulnerable but lesser. They have a stake in helping others, and so we the concept is that we're organizing the people so that they can help themselves, and organizing other sectors so that they can help this sector. So that was the overall concept, and it spread to schools and to other areas. So we have like 5 centers in Luzon. No, 18. 8 centers in Luzon, 5 in Visayas, and 5 in Mindanao. And so it's pretty well covered, the whole of the Philippines. And we receive funding from different organizations, embassies, and solidarity groups abroad. So that was the overall framework. And but at that time it was like the one dealing with disasters, the traditional the church, you know. But it's just when there's a disaster relief here and everywhere, that's very helpful, but there's no development frame. So with the Red Cross, I might say that the you know, they're very helpful really. But I think it's CDRC is the first one that deals with disaster in a comprehensive manner, that has a philosophy and linking it with disasters and development work, and tackling the issues of poverty. So that's why when we deal with disasters, we're not just talking about a typhoon here and there or an earthquake or volcanic eruption here, but more on why these people were affected more than the other people. So because of their location, they have no other choice to go to a safer place, and there are there are and their socioeconomic status in the society. And so in approaching that kind of situation, you cannot do, or these centers, CDRC as the national center and the regional centers, cannot do it by themselves. So it has to link with the, the, the overall movement for change, the organizing sector, the peasantry, in the urban centers. And so it's like what we envision, a movement. And so it spread, and we call our approach as citizenry-based, development-oriented disaster management. Citizenry-based because it is based on the citizenry, or on the citizens, the, as I said, vulnerable and the less vulnerable. And it is development-oriented because even if you do relief, it is within the context of development. Because relief can be really very even anti-development, because it can bring in you that you are poor, you are helpless, etc. In the way you treat the survivors. So, like we always say, we do relief in the context of development work, meaning you deal with people whom we want to regain or restore their dignity. Don't ask them to line up long queue under the heat of the sun, but we ask them to prioritize. They're the one prioritizing who in the community would receive assistance, and they are the one identifying their needs. It's not like, okay, because you are affected, you need bigas and sardinas, or rice and sardines. But what are your needs? So it's more like that. And there's also, we introduced the vulnerability capacity needs assessment. In fact, we added HCVA, hazard capacity vulnerability needs assessment. In fact, we trained a lot of the Red Cross in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos through Ian Wilderspin about this approach. We have this kind of program which is donor education. Donor reacts, why? You will educate us. No, it's not that we are educating you. You're more educated than us. But we want you to understand the context of where we are operating and why are we doing this. So we ask them to go to the field and see the people and see the result of the intervention, that after the onslaught of disaster, people are having see dispersal, and they're doing this and there. So they're happy. And that resulted to inviting me abroad. So that's why I go to the Netherlands, to Belgium, and to Switzerland, explaining this kind of approach. And
did you develop this totally from yourself, or were there other organizations or sources that you? It's you. Yeah. There was no examples on this work before.
That's why we're saying we have no pattern. But we were inspired by Andre Weichmann. Is it Andre Weichmann of the Red Cross?
Okay. Anders Wickman. Yeah.
Yeah, because he was the one who wrote this, the vulnerability issues.
Yeah.
And we expounded on that. One of our staff, older staff, developed this concept of disaster as a question of vulnerability. And from there, we came up with all this concept. But it's not entirely, just with us. But because, like me, I came from the development world. I was part of the movement for change. I was put into prison, and so this concept about linking everything to development is not new. But applying it to disasters in the Philippines, I think we pioneered on that, and then we promoted. Later on, you realize that when I'm invited to like Yokohama and others, you talk about this community-based, and then from there, started CBDM, CBDRM, and then IIRR during one of the meetings in Cambodia picked up the because I was saying, the problem with community-based disaster management is that the community-based aspect is not fully understood. Like an NGO or INGO could have a project in Ghent, for example, and it is their project, but it is located in a community, so they call it community-based. That's why this is a project of so and so and so and so, located in a community, and they call it community-based.
Which it wasn't.
But it's not what we meant. What we meant is,
community managed,
like community managed, etc., etc. Later on, IIRR, Rusty, he was my staff. They formed a course on community managed disaster management. But again, the concept was like only in one of the frame of the book I saw that they counterpose community-based and community managed, but the caricature is ours. But what we meant with is community managed. So I criticized that because I like, okay, you run a course on community managed, that's fine, but don't contrapose the one we're saying, because what we're saying is the same. And now community managed is also very well known in Africa and in other parts of the world. And so, but it's basically, the root is the what we call citizenry based, development oriented disaster management, which up to this date is not really fully captured yet, but it was translated into community based disaster management, community managed disaster management, because the citizenry based development oriented disaster management is a very progressive approach. It's like tackling root causes of vulnerability. And when you tackle root causes of vulnerability, you go back to your activist days, you go back to confronting the status quo, confronting the socio-economic political system in a country.
Mobilizing people.
Yeah, and no one in the disaster management group would like to go that far.
I mean, I met you first time, I think, in the context of the UN and so on. So then from a kind of NGO background, you got more and more engaged, or also being asked by UNESCO, by ISDR, and then later by UNDP. I mean, can you say how that contact established, and did you manage to influence their agenda in the end, you think? Or
well, it actually happened when we met. That was before, in the early 90s. And as I said in my narration, that because of our work and the donors coming in, they began to invite me and speak in different forums. And then, the embassies, having funded some of our project, begin to invite us to showcase our things in Africa. So that was the beginning. And then I studied in England, because I was 10 years engrossed in practice, not so much theorizing, not so we just involved. And I said, okay, that's enough. And then there was this very timely, I was asked by the British government or British embassy, do you want to study in England? And I said, why not? And so I was asked to, but I thought it would not happen, because I realized it's very competitive. And then when he said, okay, fill up the form, and I realized, it's not really an invitation, probably, because you will apply in a competitive environment.
They will
and so, but finally I was chosen, and I was happy. So I enrolled in development practice, which tackled,
where was that? In the
in UK, in Oxford.
In Oxford.
Oxford Brookes University. And so there's so many topics there that we are doing: appropriate technology, gender, disaster reduction, or at that time disaster management, humanitarian law, refugee law. So I took all those courses. And in a way, it has like, that was my orientation, and then you have practice, and now you go back to theorizing. And so, and that was really good.
And who was teaching there?
Ian Davis was
Ian
one
Davis.
of them, Hugo Slim, and some others.
Yasmin Aysan there?
Yasmin left when I was there, but I met her long before, because I didn't realize that I went to Oxford Brookes during the time when I was, I went to Oxford because I was invited by Oxfam. So, and I went to Oxford Brookes University during the time of Asmin. And so it was like when we met again many, many years later. So we were recalling, so you were that small lady coming to, but when I came to, he was no longer there. It was Ian Davis who was there. And then of course, in the course of attending this meeting, you realize there are you would meet people whom you just read in their
in
papers
publications,
publication, and some people would also say, "Oh, I read your publication." So somehow you have an interaction with these international gurus, and then you realize that people refer to you the same, which is really not. Then.
And then the UN, when did you?
I joined the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. I was a speaker. The UN, ISDR at that time, IDNDR, the IDNDR.
International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction.
Was it Philip Boulay? Yeah. I think he met me somewhere. He knows my work. Then he invited me to be the keynote of the closing of the IDNDR in Asia, the closing of the decade. He invited me to be the keynote in Bangkok, the Asia part. So I said, okay, this is the time to really put my foot forward, in the sense of, because I was criticizing that IDNDR is like International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction. So you are emphasizing the naturalness of disaster, and which we were saying before, long before, that there are no natural disasters, and then all of a sudden the UN declared a natural decade. And so when he invited me, probably he knew what I would say, and so I said, I criticized that, and I put forward many ideas, and so I said that's the end of my relation with the UN. They would not like me, but then all the more they invited me to speak in different forums. So I participated in various activities of the UN, not only as participants but speaker. Then in that meeting in Bangkok, there were two ADPC staff who noticed me and invited me to join ADPC. So that's the time.
And who were they?
It's Dave Hollister and Loy Rego.
Yeah.
So they invited me, and so I joined ADPC, and
as a staff member or as a trainer?
as a staff member, like I think training manager. But then in 3 months' time, David Hollister, the deputy director, or that time he was not deputy director yet, but he is acting as assistant to the director, and he promoted me to become the director of training. So I was the first director of training education of ADPC, and probably the second woman to be in a director level position.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
And so I lasted there for 3 years, and I resigned when I got married. My husband really think that I need to resign because I was so involved that to the point that staying too late, and so he said, it's not good for you, resign.
You were too married to your job and not to him.
So I resigned, and we were in the thinking that it is a retirement, but then the tsunami struck, and somebody from New York called me, and he said, we need you. I said, no, I don't want to work in New York. He said, no, we will post you in Bangkok. Okay, I got interested. I was in the Philippines then. And it's just a 6 months consultancy for the special unit for South-South cooperation, because they have I think some southern government gave them money for the tsunami. And so I accepted. I became their consultant for 6 months, and then that 6 months lasted to 8 years.
Wow.
So that's why I joined the UN.
And then the ISDR later tried to set up a NGO network, and they invited you to kind of start up the process, no?
During the midterm review of the IDNDR, we were few NGOs present in Yokohama. that we were really marginalized. We felt that, you know, the UN didn't want or did not want us to get involved. But our noise was not enough, and so we decided in one of the corners to organize the Global Forum of NGOs for Disaster Reduction, and you know, it was just like a loose organization. Whoever who wants to become a member, but you know, who wants to become a member when there's no policy yet. It was just an initiation. And so at that point, I was assigned to become the president of GFNDR, and then NK Jain of Joint Assistance Center in India volunteered to become the secretariat, and then all the others become members, and JAC was the one following them up. We managed to organize several forums, one in India, one in Nepal, one in the Philippines, and one in the US. And it's like we had no support. We had no support from the international NGOs, and we have no support with the UN. And you know, we were all busy with all our own organizations. So, but IDNDR tried to baby us in meetings, in meetings like with the poster, but nothing more than that. And so when the IDNDR closed, it sort of died down also. And so when Feng Min discussed with me that why don't we start an NGO at the global level, I said, of course, why not? And she knew, and I told her about the GFNDR. And so she said, okay, we have materials, we have lessons to start from. And so it was a meeting in Bangkok. It's a UN meeting, but we were, both of us were having our own agenda. So we were discussing. She said, okay, I'll come up with a concept. She came up with the concept very fast, and we discussed about it. And so we had the first consultation in I think it is in July in 2006 in Geneva, in the office of the ISDR, or in one of those offices. And we there I presented the lessons of the GFNDR. I still have a copy, and so challenging the NGOs present there to organize one, because it's like during my time we had no support, we had no there's no critical mass of people of NGOs. So but at that time they did not say categorically that they would. There was another meeting, and maybe you were do you remember two meetings or only one meeting?
Two meetings. There was another one, I think, in October or so.
Either September or October.
Yeah. But also in Kobe, apparently, you also made a statement at the closing, no? About the importance of paying more attention to community work.
And that was in...
Because that's in 2005.
In 2005.
So Kobe somehow triggered also this interest in having
yes, it's true.
NGOs.
I remember that. It was in during the initiation of the ISDR, right, in 2005. I was asked by the NGOs to represent the NGO statement, and I read the statement. At that time, I was hesitant because I knew I would be joining the UN, because I joined the UN in January 2005, and immediately after the Kobe. And so, and that was January. In July, that's the consultation, and then another one in October. And that in October, the NGOs were ready. That they
there
said
was a lot
yes,
more people, and
there are a lot more people, and they were ready that they will do that. And then we launched the NGO in 2007.
GNDR, the global network with Marcus in the lead, and at the global platform in Geneva.
So every 2 years, the GNDR was reading its statement. And that was, and for me,
and did the views from the front line and all of that.
But that's the one I was looking for the platform in which the NGO could have a statement for for the governments, because it's a government platform. The UN is more government platform, and but the NGO to speak in that platform, wherein we could challenge the reports of the governments that, hey, we did a lot of these things, we did this and we did it, we're excellent. And then there's a voice from the NGO saying, hey, yes, there's cloud but there's no rain, something like that. And that was our idea long before, when we established the GFNDR. But because we had no clout, who are we? Small NGO in the Philippines, small NGO in India. But now with the INGOs taking the lead, it has more future. And since then, it's a history. GNDR is now made its mark.
And sometimes it had tense relationships with ISDR as well.
It is, because you can imagine the NGOs come up with a strong statement. Even within the NGOs, they don't immediately gel, in the sense that others would like it to be stronger and the other one would like it to be tame. And the middle ground, you have to do balancing.
Yeah.
So on that side, there's an NGO dynamics. And then of course you consider also the voice of the southern NGO to be encapsulated in a statement, right? Meanwhile, you will present that first to the ISDR, to the UN, before it is read in the assembly. And there's also reaction. Of course it would react, because those who presented this to the UN to be part of also had to massage the people who would allow. And so there's so much negotiation between and within. And I'm in the middle of that. Knowing NGO, being with the UN, and being part of this, that initiated this one. And so I'm not pro or against or whatever. It's just a reality that we have to please everybody at that point. Otherwise, we lose the platform, and we don't want to lose that. On the other hand, we don't want also to lose the meaning of the statement, because we want it to be strong, to have an impact, but not stronger enough to be rejected. You know what I mean? Something like that. So, and that was tense. That you have to walk to and fro and all that. But
I think now NGOs tend to be a bit less confrontational and a bit more constructive, like saying, well, we need to work with local governments and together we can maybe contribute more effectively, but no longer like constantly criticizing the system, because they say it's a bit of a dead-end street. I mean, if you're only negative about everything, you don't offer solutions. So.
The landscape has changed. That was my. I have a short article about the landscape has changed. It's the NGOs recognizing that you're an NGO, you're part of the governance structure, and you can only advocate, and you can do public awareness on the ground, but advocate. On the other hand, government realized that we cannot do the work alone. So while at the same time the NGOs are more into understanding or cooperating, the government also become more accommodating, and the UN facilitated that kind of process, which is now it is embedded in the Sendai document, the all-inclusive, etc. And so I think we're moving forward in that regard. I cannot say that I'm fully satisfied, but I'm happy with the way things are. You were asking, was I able to influence the UN? I don't think. It's difficult to say, but I think they don't know what to do with me. When I was there, my contract ended. I have no specific budget, but they think that what I have started is something meaningful. So they retained me, and I get out of the UN because of my retirement. I already reached 62, and so influencing, my biggest thing that I could say is that, the project Citizenry Based Development Oriented Academy, that I think they gave me budget for 2 pilots, and there's no pilot is useless if it's not pursued. And I'm able to, before I left, I was able to hold 6 or 7 South Development Academy, in which you gather the community people, because I was attending a meeting in New York. I organized a forum, and the speakers was like Margareta Wallstrom, Briseño, and all these leaders. And I was just thinking, oh, what am I doing? I'm promoting community-based, and here are the leaders all speaking about communities. Come up with a concept, and submitted it, and it was approved. That's why I had the local version of all this forum, all this we international doing, participating, but the communities are never invited.
No.
And the community people, the old community leader never validated his solution to any community. So the idea of this academy is for them to gather together, validate their solutions, share, and at least before they die, they know that they've done something that contributed to the whole province, or so.
Just for your information, in Cancun, 26% of the participants came from civil society. So compared to former meeting, it's a huge success. So even if you doubt about your influence, indirectly it has made a huge difference in terms of their commitment. Also, I think the interesting thing is that NGOs also see these platforms, these gatherings, as a valid place to promote their stuff. So because you could also think, oh, they just want a kind of social forum, they just want to meet amongst themselves. But now they really like the engagement with governments, with private sector, with academics. So I think it's a huge progress.
I think it's a huge progress. And to think that when governments, local government, for example, Philippines or India, when they see their counterpart NGOs in Geneva and other, so there's some sort of respect and recognition that they will continue the work together back home. And that's the experience.
And
so
also
far.
NGOs were part of some government delegations and so on. So that's also even young people and so on in the Philippines. So I think there's definitely a lot of progress made, and you have planted a lot of seeds and to make it happen, no?
Well, a little, and whatever contribution. For me, what is important is the result. I'm not, into saying, I did this, or I influenced that, or I fought this way out. It's not. But the result is worth celebrating. I think it's and for me, meeting people, these gurus like Ben Wisner, Alan Labelle, and Ian Davis. And
Gustavo,
Gustavo in forums, and that you discuss at the level, not only referring to your thesis according to Dr. Wisner, but you're one of them, and you share with each other ideas and the possibility of working together. So that's already, for me, is worth remembering. And there are young people, young researchers who are coming up, like JC, and who is very active in this, and NGO leaders. So
I think also, the young generation does not know this history. They have a very shorter time span, and they tend to reinvent things which have already a long time been discussed, like, oh, there's a link between disasters and development and so on, and they kind of think that they discovered this. But so I think it is important for them to know also that a lot of people have already thought about it 3 decades ago. And
that's interesting. Some people think that they invented it. Sometimes I attend meetings of these young people, and it's true. They think when they speak, like, you could see yourself 30 years ago, and probably I was thinking, maybe I thought just like what I told you, I thought we invented the term internal refugees, and because we're pushing this in discourses. to find out in Oxford that it has been discovered long time ago. So that is being repeated, that people now explaining why it should be community managed, and especially if they don't know me, and they continue to so it's just, well, I think they need to discover that what they're doing is a continuation, and they have to come up with new solutions or improved solutions and continue the advocacy. Now going to it's now going part of the system. Like for example in the Philippines, there's a law, a revision of the old law, and it's now disaster risk reduction and management. It's not just the NDRR, because it's now the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management, and then setting up the institutional arrangement up to the barangay level. So you could see all over the country there's provincial disaster management office or disaster reduction management office. So it's now in the system, and also in other countries. So,
but the Philippines is ahead. I mean, there's not that many similar systems in other countries yet.
Yeah.
No?
The engagement with the NGOs in the disaster reduction has also paved that way. And so, I think, but the role of the NGO should still remain. It should not be co-opted in a sense that, let's rest our laurels that we have reached this way and we are successful. I think the NGOs, the staff of the NGOs now should continue and pursue, and do not forget the history, because otherwise you will be continuing to advocate the things that have been accepted along the way, and they have the tendency, if there's no collective memory, if there's no sense of history in the organization. So yeah.